Well, hello, everybody. I think it's Friday. I can't remember how long we've been doing this. I apologize. I look very like I'm sitting in a cave, which is sort of what it feels like. I'm sitting in my cave of privilege. Today is not a normal TGIF. Today is a special day. I am very touched. I am very confused. I'm horrified and I'm sad. So I reached out to a woman of faith, one of the most optimistic people I know, one of the brightest people I know, who is obviously, she is Denise Richardson. And I said, Denise, help me make sense of this. I've not walked in your shoes. I'm white, I'm Jewish, I'm privileged. I can care till the cows come home. And actually, I don't even know when the darn cows come home. I just want to understand, what can I do? What should I think? How can I help? How do you feel? There's so many things I've wanted to ask so many people, and you're just one of the kindest people I know. So I am in advance asking of those of you who are watching us today who are African American to forgive me for all the things I don't know, and for being on the white side of what is going on in this country. And I'm reaching out to you, Denise, on behalf of myself and my listeners and my followers to say, help us help this situation. And where do we begin?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for asking me to join you today. I want you to know May 25th, I happened to turn on the television and I was watching a police officer with his knee in a black man's neck with his hand in his pocket. And he was saying, I can't breathe. And people there at the sidewalk, I presume they were on a sidewalk and they were videotaping, he's saying he can't breathe, get your knee off of his neck. And he didn't do that. And I thought to myself, he thinks, well, what the heck are you going to do about it? And George Floyd died. He killed him. There are words that have been used like assassination. But for the first time, the world saw what Black men have been experiencing for years, for eons. And when the world saw it and they saw how not just inappropriate, how wrong it was, how hellish it was, when they saw it, they said, no, this is not right. So on May 26th, the marches began. And along with the marches came looting and rioting. Now, I was really angry about the looting and the rioting because those marchers, they were representing a man of faith, a good human being, a father, a brother, member of a family that is Christian. He was all that was good. And his life was gone after 8 minutes and 46 seconds. So I said to myself, and I'm not a person, despite being in the media, like former GMA correspondent, I have my own radio show now. I co-host the Pledge Drive on PBS. I have a show called Fuel for the Spirit. Despite all that, I'm not usually someone who will go onto a Facebook and rant. I'm not that person. But when I saw the extent of the looting, and I saw a Black woman, an elder in Minneapolis, sitting down in tears, and she said, where I used to shop is gone. That's the only store I had. I saw a Black gentleman, who had just opened his sports bar. He said, this was my dream. I put every dime into it. My heart is broken. I don't know what to do next. As angry as I was at that, I thought the overriding picture is unarmed Black men are shot and nobody pays the piper on it when it comes to law enforcement. Now, I won't say no one because someone recently was sentenced to 20 years in jail, and I'll mention that name later. And so what happens when I watch all of this, and I was watching it every day, I then became so pained It was like there was a brick on my chest. And when the good thing that I saw among the protesters, young people, black and white people, all kinds of people came together. It was the most unifying experience, as horrific as it was. It was the most unifying experience that could possibly have happened. Yet we have no, go ahead.
I feel like we are in a place in history right now.
Yep.
And I am trying to understand where we are in history. You know, there's a part of me that grew up on that sort of, you know, as Jewish kids do, we grow up, you know, I remember there was a country club in the neighborhood that didn't accept Jews. Big deal. It wasn't hanging Jews. But I grew up on the stories of my grandparents and how they came to this country and escaped from the pogroms in World War II. And all of that was a place in history.
Mm-hmm.
We are now in a place of history that goes back to slavery.
Yep.
And I understand that. I don't understand. It is a part of my brain when Rand Paul could not vote in a good Christian way, Jewish way, human way. I just sat back and I said, I don't recognize my America. Before social media, you could live in a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
The bubble has burst.
Mm-hmm.
How do you reconcile, how do you maintain your faith in God when your people have suffered for so long? I mean, we're going through COVID. I asked you the other day about how you see COVID, and you said, oh, God wanted us to pay attention globally. And I thought, well, he got our damn attention. You know, but I thought, now this, and this makes sense to me in the midst of COVID, because so many black and brown people, so many more black and brown people are dying than white people.
Exactly.
I am hoping we are at a tipping point. Do you think we are?
I think we're working towards a tipping point. I think that it's going to require a lot of work. When I think of this, I've done a show that's airing on my radio show Saturday night on Black fathers, Black sons, and the talks that they have to have.
What's the talk? Explain the talk.
All right. You're a Black father, and your father had this talk with you, and your father said to you, when you go out, I'm translating it this way, keep a low profile. If a police officer approaches you, don't mouth off. Make sure, this is Ed King talking, his father was talking to him, he's an attorney, and Ed King talking to his son, Eddie. And he said to Eddie, make sure you have your identification and make sure you say, yes, sir, no, sir. Now, no white parent has had to do that.
No, I had to tell my kids, don't drink and drive.
Okay.
Be careful. You know, the first time I heard about the talk, a friend of mine explained to me that he had to explain to his two sons, when you get stopped for a speeding ticket, be prepared to kiss the pavement. And if that's what you have to do to get home, for him, the talk was about, you must get home. And I heard it and my heart hurt. But my heart, you know, I had a few people who on Blackout Tuesday or whatever it was, were very upset with me because I was focusing on Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. But my daughter called me and gave me this analogy, all homes matter. But my house is on fire right now. So what house do we pay attention to? And I'm watching the people come through. Georgia Wolf just said, Denise, you're the epitome of grace. Hi, ladies. Happy Friday. People don't want to miss this conversation. I think those of us who come from white privilege, and I'm sorry, I'm going to cry through this whole thing because I feel helpless and I feel spoiled and privileged and frozen because I'm not in the streets, Denise. I'm not marching because I'm scared of COVID. And I know I raised good children because we have a very mixed universe, as you know. Our lives are filled with Muslim people, white people, Jewish people, Christian people, yellow people. If they came in orange and blue, and they were good people, they would be in our lives and at our table. But how do you reconcile faith with all of this? How do you keep that?
I guess I have to go back to being 6 years old and having an apparition, literally. And I did see Jesus and I did see the Blessed Mother. And I knew at that age that there was something I was supposed to be doing in my life. Fast forward a few years ago, I said, well, wait a minute. If you had that apparition, he doesn't show up for everybody. What do you think you're supposed to be doing? And I believe in my heart of hearts that I'm supposed to be getting people to connect with others that they normally would not connect with.
Yes, you also did admit something very funny to me, that you thought you'd like to be a nun, but you didn't become a nun. Why?
Because I didn't like their outfits. It's true.
That's what I love about you, Denise. Like, you're profoundly serious and you had apparitions. I had some apparitions, but they might have had something to do with pharmaceuticals. But but yours turned out different than mine, you know?
But I knew, I've always known that I'm a person of a deep faith, and I always know that when another person, there's so many people who say they are steeped in faith. They go to church on Sunday, and yet they can use words that shouldn't be used towards another person. And yet they can say, oh, we're going to go back to church even though we shouldn't. And who cares about the coronavirus, because God is going to take care of us. And they go to the divine experience, but they don't necessarily absorb the divine experience. And if I look at you, Marla, and I then talk about you being Jewish and then lambast you for not being in the streets, I have to then think about, why am I doing that? And why I'm really appreciative of your asking me to be on today, because I really want to ask the people who are with us, if you're prejudiced, if you've used the N word, I just want to know why. I'm not going to argue with you. I just want to hear the voice tell me why you think your life is better than my life, or your life is better than any person's life that's on that street.
You know, Denise, I want to offer you an answer. I think as human beings, we are often afraid of what we don't know. And the news for our lifetime, because we're about the same age, shows, I mean, I made some of those series, the black guy is the bad guy, it's like, the guy with the accent is a bad guy. I used to think, French people were all snobs and Italian people were all this, and this is all that. I had so many misconceptions growing up in my little Denver beautiful bubble with the smell of fresh cut grass in a safe neighborhood, blah, blah, blah. And when I started traveling, and when I started living my adult life, and it became populated by people I was afraid of because I didn't know. I think we're often unafraid of what we don't know. And I think because we have lived in segregated communities,
Yeah.
I think that because we finance education through the real estate tax, which in and of itself is inherently against the poor,
Mm-hmm.
it works against you because of gerrymandering. Oh, I just want to say, Janet Allen, as a white Irish Catholic, I'm aware of being treated differently in Northern Ireland. However, the whole world has been aware of how badly Black Americans have been treated for centuries. What I cannot understand is how the rest of America can stand by and do nothing. By being a bystander, surely they're complicit. Am I wrong? No, I think she's right. We're wrong.
I
If
think
we
that,
don't do anything, we're complicit.
let me read you something, because I don't know that you can see this. This is this little girl who's holding this this sign. I'm going to read it to you. It says, "We said Black Lives Matter. Never said only Black Lives Matter. We know all lives matter. We just need your help with hashtag Black Lives Matter, for Black lives are in danger." As you walk down the street, I have said it countless times to young men. I have said it to young. I've gone to the theater. I've come out. I've met these young African American men who are so talented, and I'll say to them, "Okay, on your way home, you be careful. If a policeman approaches you, I give them the talk. Don't mouth off, stand there, show your ID, but just don't feel scared, but don't be aggressive in any way. In fact, Ed King said to me, the attorney, he said, I told my son, don't look them in the eye. Now, is when you have to get up every day and worry when your kid leaves the house, is he or she going to come home? Or maybe you are home and police are coming to the wrong apartment and they end up killing you. Breonna Taylor, they end up killing her. So, and you say to yourself, when they say no justice, no peace, even the Attorney General for Minnesota said it's difficult to get convictions with police officers. It's difficult. So it's really about people taking a hard look at their thinking process. And when they look at me, or they look at or they may look at me and think, oh, she's middle class, she's more like me, she sounds like me. I had one guy when I was in corporate America, he came to my office and he was staring at me and I said, you're staring. He said, where did you learn to, white guy, where did you learn to speak that way? And I said, where did you learn to speak that way? He said, at home. I said, by golly, so did I. But the presumption was I was Black, I shouldn't speak that way. I spent a year on the street with police in New York City when I was at WOR Radio, did a documentary. And when we went into an apartment where there was a push-in, so the woman was beaten. There was no robbery, but she was beaten in her, I'll never forget this, her eye was so swollen, but there was blood along the walls. And by the time I got to the living room, I passed out, literally passed out. So he had the woman, he's trying to help her, and I'm on the floor. But when we went back to the precinct, they said to me, well, why did you pass out? And I said, because it just is abhorrent to me. I couldn't take it. He said, but you're from the Bronx. In that question was, you're Black, you're from the Bronx, you must have seen pain like this. There was all of these presumptions. So what are the presumptions that people have? You have said it. Well, that person's Black, maybe that person's going to attack me. You didn't say those words. I'm putting words in your mouth. Or if you're French, you're going to be this way or that way. But the question is, there are other people who just, and they're allegedly God-fearing, who just believe I'm not worthy of the planet they're living on. And it's now time to put a stop to it. And our young people are out there and they're the hope for tomorrow. But here's what I wanted to see. When I wanted to see protesters sitting down, holding up their placards, Black Lives Matter, or whatever else, just no justice, no peace, I wanted them to be able to flip it and say, vote, I think it's November 13th, because that's where we have to go with this. This is about voting. This is about power.
That's the key.
This is about census, filling out that census.
I did it.
And knowing that when you do, legally, no one is able to use that census against you. Legally, they say that, but they don't use that census against you. But those are the first steps. I want people to not only do that, but when you know what happens, you go somewhere, you get really energized, you come home, and that's where it stops. But I want people to come home and find their Democratic organization, their Republican organization. I want them to understand how government works, how democracy works, and work the system. I believe, because of my faith, that we all are very powerful people. We are powerful. People would have us believe that we're not, but we are. And if you believe that you're powerful, what people say doesn't matter to you. How you approach the world and how you approach your future in the world, you'll not think that things aren't possible, but it is possible. If I'm lying, I'm dying, because that has been my life. My life has been, God gave me this life. And my payment for that is to get people who don't want to talk to each other, but more importantly, to hear each other. We have to hear each other. So part of all this change Has to be that. But more importantly, we need an agenda where there's transparency, where you can get into police records if they have a history of having problems in the community. We want to see what that history is. We can't let people just get away. And the most abhorrent thing that I saw in Buffalo that people were talking about today, a tall man, 75 years old, happened to be white. Police are walking by. He stopped and he was engaging for some reason, and one pushed him. He fell down and hit his head on the cement, saw the blood. When they reported it, they said he tripped, except it was being videotaped. Now that happened yesterday. So picture that. So they did it to him, but that's highly unusual, but they do it to us all the time. All the
Democracy
time.
is so fragile. We thought, although when you look back to the founding of this country, I mean, you know, Black people built, you know, immigrants built this country, Black slaves built this country, and
But we
now
were
we're all
chattel.
here.
We were chattel. We weren't persons. We were people who came to do the work. We were.
Slavery.
There was no value there for us.
But the fact of the matter is that your people helped build this country.
Yep.
I think an immigrant population helped build it, but under different circumstances. They chose to come. You did not choose to come. But now we're here and we're in this melting pot. And I feel like there was something under a bandage that was ugly and festering and rotting. And over the past 10 days, it got ripped off. You know, I talked to my daughter, Sydney, today, and I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, no, I'm not okay. And I don't know what to do. And I mean, she is so filled with angst and guilt and trying to figure out where she fits in this. And the only thing I can say is do good. And right now, this is a place where we need to focus, and we can't go home and forget about this. We'll vote. How do we get more young Black people to vote? How do we get them to understand gerrymandering? What are some tangible things that this group of women that I'm watching one after the other, write things? She says, Janet Allen said, people may think they're not racist. However, you may be displaying implicit bias in your actions. Children are born without prejudice. They pick up on our actions. Mm-hmm. How, right now, today, where does somebody white begin, Denise? Where does somebody white start?
This is something I've had in mind for so many years. I've wanted powerful people who know how to use their power to get what you want in your community, in your business. I've wanted you to connect with groups of Black people who need to understand how to change their community, who need to understand who need to understand it takes steps, it takes time, and it takes mentors. So if you want to concretely do something, then connect with pastors, and you have meetings with a group of pastors and say, all right, here's what I can do. This is my background. And I would like to teach people, I would like to find out what the needs are and teach people how to attract, how to utilize the power within to change the face of their community, not by gentrification, but to change it. If there's a lot next door, you clean up the lot. But before you do that, you have to find out who owns the lot. You have to find out if you clean it up, does that mean that someone's going to come in and build on that lot? So you're kind of wasting your time. But I've always thought that if we could marry powerful people like yourself with people in a community, and you start with the pastors, and you teach people how to take control. It's about taking control of your life and your community. It's about not believing that there is no tomorrow. You have a lot of people on welfare. I have friends in NYCHA buildings, and you get horrible stories out of those buildings. And yet the government allowed those buildings to deteriorate over years over years. And when they send people in to clean them, you'd be surprised. I know of one building that the guys kind of show up, gave a lick and a promise, and walked out and didn't do their job. So you empower people to change their communities and change their lives, and say when November comes, en masse, either you do a write-in ballot or you go to the polls, but en masse. And when you're out there protesting, placard, Black Lives Matter, reverse it, vote November 13th. Just change the way we do it. And I know I have white friends as well, but my friends are kind of engaged in different ways. But I've always believed in my heart that might be one way to bring people together.
I just think, okay, I know somebody who can hook me up with some pastors. I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, okay, all right, I'm game. And then I think of, I'll tell you a crazy story, actually. So these issues were very important to me as a young woman, because someone very important in my life was African American. It still is, as a matter of fact. And you know, he touched me in a way. Like I there were things I didn't know. And when I moved to Chicago, we had met when we were in college, and I moved to Chicago, moved away, lost touch. But when I moved to Chicago, I said, I'm going to keep working towards this, right? I'm going to keep working towards this. So I decided that I would teach young women in Cabrini Green who wanted to get into television, like how to even go on an interview.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized really early on that I had to, it wasn't called white privilege then. It was just called like, oh shit, I don't know what to do here, because they were coming from such a different place. And I remember telling them, like, you know, it starts by, we do judge a book by its cover. And if you go to an interview in this way, this isn't going to work for you. So you may want to think about this, and let's look at your resume, and did this and did that. And one girl once said to me, what do you know that you can tell me? I live in Cabrini Green. You come visit. What do you know about my life? And I went, oh shit, she is so right. And years later, the Johnson family hired me I started, basically, I was the team that launched what was it called at the time? Ebony Jet Celebrity Showcase, which eventually became a whole network. And I remember I was invited to a lunch, and Jesse Jackson came, and we were in the elevator, and it was to introduce me to the community. And it was very wealthy Black businessman. Mm-hmm. And Jesse Jackson turned to Mr. Johnson and said, really? Pointing at me, really? You couldn't find anyone in the Black community to do this job? And I was horribly insulted. I was like, sure. I'm with this. I'm here to do this job. I'm a good. Today, I understand why he did that. Mm-hmm. But what Johnson said was, I hired her because I couldn't find anyone else, and she will train people. And that is what happened. But he was wise enough to know, like, if we don't have the people in our community, we're going to bring the people, we're going to teach them. And I knew I had a lifespan, a short lifespan. But the whole time I was trying to make a difference, I realized, like, it needed to be a two-way dialogue, because I needed to understand what they saw when they looked at me, and how we could communicate eye to eye, heart to heart, having walked in such different paths. America's finally walking in one direction, I think, a lot of people, as they march these streets. But how do we stay there? That's what worries me. And if I do go to speak to these people, aren't I just going to be another ridiculous white person trying to...
No, but you're not going to speak to these people, these young people, if it's young people or senior people in their 50s. You're not going with the same approach. So your approach now would be, I'm here to help you help yourselves, but I want to know who you are, and I want to take any questions you have of me and ask who I am. And then I want to show you how people use power to get what they want for their communities. So you open that dialogue because we never get to the heart of it. We never get to. I had a Jewish landlord when I was growing up, and there were times I was really upset by the Jewish landlord. But as I grew up, I realized I had labeled that person in my brain that this wasn't a good person. Consequently, maybe Jews aren't good people. And then some of my best friends later became Jewish people. But you have to get to the heart of who you are, who they are, and say, I'm not leaving tomorrow. I want to be here to help you, but I need to know what you want to know.
Somebody just asked a question, Denise, that I think is important. I'm sorry, I'm trying to listen. And Ruth asked, does endemic racism require Black people to look and sound like white people?
You'd be surprised.
You know what she's saying?
You know,
I
I
exactly
think
what she's saying.
I think yes, because I think when people go to apply for a job, they're expecting people to sound corporate. You know, you have to have that, and you have to have that corporate look, and you have to have the corporate hair. But
The corporate hair, what's the corporate hair?
corporate hair is not the natural hair that you would have. It's the wig that I'm wearing. I just happen to wear wigs, but it's, they want you to fit in based on their values without taking a good hard look at your values. It's beginning to change. I'm seeing it on television, and I'm seeing that in some areas it's beginning to change. But she's right. People want you to, they want you to be them. They want you to be them, and they don't take time to get to know who you are, what your value is. Your value is how you present yourself, how you engage with people, how you do your work. Those are the values. Are your values in line with our corporate culture? And if they're in line, who the hell cares how you do your hair, as long as you look presentable when you come to work? But yes, are people racist? Yes, they are. But how do we get to a place that is a place of respect, that is a place of, she's not me, I'm not her, but there's a meeting ground, and how do I get to know her or him, and come from a respectful place? I'm furious over, um you know, well, I don't want to mention the name of the national leadership, but that person doesn't care about us. That person has shown up to be, in essence, we're not we're not good enough because it doesn't meet his standards, and his standards is about his people and money. And it's very painful. I had to stop listening to him. I couldn't take it anymore. So national leadership isn't there for us, but we have to show national leadership for the length of time that's there, how to behave.
We the people have to take certain paths. I want you to know I'm looking on Facebook, and Bo, I would love if you jump in with questions, because it's really hard for me. I want to be focused on Denise, and so many questions are coming through. So I am asking you to please do that for me. But one of the things that a number of people are talking about is that their synagogues and churches get together and pray together often and share music and share an experience. I think that is a beautiful thing.
Excellent. And I saw that. I was at a service, I forget the holiday, it was a Jewish holiday, and there were kids from Harlem in a program in Harlem that came to perform, and those kids were taught Yiddish. So they sang in Yiddish. And
oh my God, I love that. That's hysterical.
And what's wonderful about that, they learned some of the culture, and they left holding hands, hugging, and being appreciative of the differences. That's where we have to go. We have to be appreciative of the differences. Invite people in who are doing great things.
See, different is what's interesting. If you and I are the same, I might as well just look in a mirror and talk to myself.
Yeah, really.
I mean, honestly, I am fascinated to talk to people who are Trump supporters. I am fascinated when I was in Germany to talk to people whose families were Nazis during the war. I am interested in talking to every cab driver, every cash. I am so interested, regardless of what school or you went to or didn't.
Exactly.
Every person has a story.
Yes.
And I was attacked in college by a man with a face mask and the crotch cut out. And I went through a plate glass window, but I did kick him in the balls. I will tell you that right now.
Oh my God.
So I got away. But years later, when I was doing documentaries, I went into Chino State Prison. I got dispensation. I was doing documentaries at the time, and I interviewed rapists. It was going to be how I was not raped. I just was in bad shape emotionally. And I needed to go talk to rapists.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you something extraordinary, because we couldn't have been more far apart, those guys and me. And they weren't all black. It was a mixed bag. Without exception, those men and boys were abused.
Mm-hmm.
And without exception, several got on their knees and begged for forgiveness.
Hmm.
One of them put his head in my lap and said, I am so sorry. I am so sorry to you, to anyone who's gone through this. And I thought, oh my God, what they did was horrible, and they deserve to be where they are. But how they got there,
Mm.
and the stories behind them. I did a story about women in prison as well. And when you talk to the women, nobody's life plan is to be your cleaning lady,
Exactly.
your gardener, or to live in prison. That is not, you don't grow up, play with your Game Boy and go, this is fun, but when I get a little older, I think I'll rob a bank and go to prison. This is not a life plan.
No.
And the anger that must be driving, I mean, I look at the riots and they're wrong. Destroying other people's property, particularly your own people's property, like anybody's property, but it's like the man with the sports bar and the woman. It's like there's a right and a wrong, but there is an anger in this country and a sadness.
Yeah, pain. It's painful. It's a deeper pain than I think I've ever felt, and I think that most people have ever felt. And it's, out of the mouths of babes come amazing things, and it's going to be, I think, our young people who are going to drive us forward. I too have spent time in prison with, I actually with lifers in Rahway
I
prison.
heard that about you, Denise. Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, yeah.
But I was with women in the Bayview Correctional Facility in New York, and I did a workshop with them. And one day during the workshop, because I wanted them to have access to jobs, the potential jobs where they wouldn't have to go and be hired by someone. And if I brought anyone in to talk to them, I would say, you're not allowed to ask them what they're here for. Just look at them as a person. I was about to tell you something about that. It just fell out of my head.
That's okay. And of course, my green chef. I don't know why my building cannot figure out that every Friday, this is what I'm doing. Don't ring my bell. So if you hear a bell, it's my green chef.
Wait, so here's the rest of it. What happens is I asked the women at one time, how many people in here have been abused? Well, by God, most, like 98% of them raised their hands. And then because I was there for a while, I would ask people, kind of what they did. But what surprised me was these are really smart ladies. They're not dumb. It's just circumstances. And what I said, but for the grace of God go I. I was fortunate. I came up, we were poor. Although my mother said I'd never think that we were poor, but we were poor. But I knew that there was a road I was supposed to travel, that I would never in my life embarrass my mother. I always wanted to make her proud of me. But I didn't have the circumstances that other people have. I've seen parents on the street and in trains belittling their children, whipping their children, just carrying on. And I'm thinking, that happened to you. And don't you remember how that felt? So
You have to break that cycle.
You have to break that cycle, but it takes us coming together, I believe, to do it. And I think I hope there's someone there. There's someone there who says I'm prejudiced or I hate Black people.
Lady, if any of you do, honestly, and I won't even say your name out loud, or you can send it to info@marlawin.com. If you do feel prejudice,
share it.
Denise and I would like you to share it, and we would like to understand it.
Yes.
I am uninformed, but I am not prejudiced. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I recognize it.
And part of that is being informed. That's about reading books. That's about, in fact, maybe even looking at some movies. But it is about understanding how the evolution of the relationship with authority, and that evolution has got to stop. It has just got to stop the way it exists. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. But I just want the protesters to know that this is a journey. And when you come back from the protest, you don't just get together and talk about the experience in 2020. You get together and say, this is the beginning of me being part of the journey for the long haul.
Mary Nelson just wrote something I want to share with all of you. The pain of racism has been felt for generations. We have been so frustrated for so long. We don't bother to share it, suspecting it will not be acknowledged. Trying to live your life, have ambition and goals is heartbreaking. Don't know how to stifle my anger anymore.
Mm-hmm. How do you say?
Thank you for
It's
sharing
not,
that.
but it's not about. I don't want her to stifle her anger. I just want her to be able to have a conversation with people where she says, this is how I'm feeling from the inside out. This is where it comes from. This is who I am. This is how I was raised. And I know this needs to change. But as you say, I don't know how to change it. The first step, I believe, it's a dialogue. It's a conversation. And also, our young Black men and women need to be joining the police force. They need to be part of the institution so that they can help to change it. But I know, having spent time a year on the street with cops, I think of this one when I was telling you about the woman where there was the pushing. It wasn't even a burglary; it just beat her. I said to myself, and by then I had been on the street with cops for a few months, and I said to myself, if I had walked in and they had gotten that guy and they were beating him, I never would have told. So it was really interesting. And it wasn't because she was a white woman.
You wouldn't have told?
I wouldn't have told.
Why?
Because they were so vicious the way they beat her. They were, whoever it was, he was a he, so vicious so that her eye could have fallen out of her head and blood all over the walls, and she can barely get up. I thought, you know something? I wouldn't have told. But interesting, this is me saying that, who's the person who cares about right and wrong. So then I say, if I say that, what happens if you're in a Black community all the time and you're only arresting Black people all the time? Then you then perceive, I would conjecture, of them being the bad guys. I would conjecture that. I would love to have this conversation with police officers where they really talk about what they're feeling, because this is so ingrained. It's so ingrained, and then there's the police officers should live in the communities where they work. But how can police officers live in New York City with a family? You can't afford it. So how do you make that work? So, but it's the work begins now. The work begins right now. And I want that woman who said that she's so angry, she's been stifling it. Don't stifle it, get it out, but don't get it out in a way that you're so aggressive that you're hurting someone, but get it out so you're talking about it. Get a group of people. I mean, the quarantine has done, this COVID has done more for us than not, aside from the horrific fact that 100,000 people died here, and you have most of them are Black and Hispanic. So that says a lot about how healthcare, that says a lot about where you live, that says a lot about people not caring. It says so much. So how do we change it? Channel that anger into change and get people to channel it with you. Channel it into change.
Okay. I would like to think that I can take this up. I want to think that I can find the time. I must find the time to do something. And I need mentorship. And I am asking you to be my mentor. And I wanted, if you think that I can do something, I'm going to need some help, because I want to do the right thing and I don't want to just write checks.
Yeah.
I really want to be in it. Sorry, don't want to do it during COVID. Unless we can Zoom. And after COVID, I'm sorry, there's a limit to my big heart, and I got to stay. But Denise, this has been in my gut and my soul my whole life. And yes, somebody just wrote, well, there are people out there doing deliveries and exposing them to COVID all the time. And they're the Blacks and the Hispanics for the most part. And I know. So I am white, I'm privileged, and I'm selfish, and I'm scared of COVID. But it still doesn't.
I'm going to stop you. No, you're not selfish. Yeah. And I do see that you're white.
I am so white. By the time COVID is over, I'm in a glow in the dark white.
But I see the heart of you, not the visual of I'm privileged. You know something? It's okay. And I love Black people who are privileged. I have the Black friends who've had planes and they've had boats and they're privileged too. There are Black people who are privileged.
Very, yes, there are.
Yeah. And so it's okay to be privileged, but it's okay to, in that privilege, use the power of it to change another life. So you don't ever defend being privileged. I think that's your right. You worked hard for that, Marla. You worked hard for it. And the ladies or gentlemen who are listening, if they're privileged, they worked hard for it too. I'm just saying, take your power and channel it into change for what's right. And what's right is that Black men and Black women need to feel as though they're part of this thing called the United States of America. It is one nation under God, indivisible. It's not Black people here and white people, but
you left out with liberty and justice for all.
Literally.
And we are screwing the pooch on that one.
Yeah, with liberty and justice for all. And it's the liberty and justice. It's time for justice. It's time for the expectation that you don't just take advantage of people and think you're going to get away with it.
It's okay, Ruth. I understand, but I still feel guilty. Ginny Combs asked, Denise, can you provide some resources for educating ourselves? She plans to watch Just Mercy, but what else? And Linda O'Neill said, Denise, it starts at the top. Last year in New Zealand, a white man walked into a house of prayer and shot 50 people and injured many more. Color and religion, not the virus, will end this world. I worked for 30 years with many Maori and Polynesian kids who have so much to give, but their upbringing doesn't know it.
And wait a minute, I've been to New Zealand. And how proud were we of the woman leading that country who by the end of the weekend after that attack, the guns were gone. She is amazing, as were the other women who stepped up with COVID. And you know something, yes, the prejudice is there, but people are working on changing it. They're working on changing it. And then we need to know how people do that internationally. And we need to rid ourselves of people who don't think people are worthy of change. They need to go home.
Janet Allen just said, it's okay to be white, Marla. It's okay to be educated. I agree. Listen, I did work hard for what I have.
You did.
But I'm part of the Lucky Sperm Club. I mean, the right sperm and the right egg got together and gave me a very safe and excellent start in life. Until I moved to Chicago and started working in Cabrini Green, and by the way, had the most amazing experience. One night I was walking, Cabrini Green, for those of you who don't know, were the projects in Chicago. I don't even know if they're still there.
They're there.
And it's kind of a rough place. And I was walking home one night because I wasn't afraid. And a Black man walked up to me and he said to me, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm walking home. And he said, are you out of your mind? I said, what do you mean? And he said, child, I am walking you home. And that man walked with me from Cabrini Green back to my house, and we talked, and he said, you need to be afraid. You have no business here. And he was like, he said, you can't just come here and walk away. And even back then I tried to reconcile, but I want to be here and I want to feel safe and I want to do that. Like, it's a very complicated situation because there's so much emotion and so much wrong for so long. And I think it begins with education. And I think you're right. I don't think that any one person can make sweeping change, but if it's just one or two people that you can help out, maybe that's meaningful.
Well, something, Rosa Parks, when she decided she wasn't going to get off the bus or she wasn't going to sit in the back, she made sweeping change with that demonstration. It turns out there was someone before her who did it some years before her, except that they didn't want to use her as the symbol because apparently she had had a baby and they didn't think it was appropriate. But something, everybody, it's just, I want you to feel the power. Feel the power. I mean, this is what God has given us. And until you feel the power and decide on how you do change and talk to people, but not just talk, listen.
Listen.
We're not a country that listens, we talk. So let's get together and listen to one another and listen and read and see what books we should be reading. I don't have the resources, but you know something? I will be happy to share that with you for your audience.
Great, thank you.
I'll be happy to do that. And I'll be happy to, I think of one pastor who's quite amazing, and he has 40,000 people at his church. And so I said, that's a pretty long line on Sunday. And he said, most of it is on the web.
Sure. On what?
Internet. So he gets most of it, but he still gets like 3,000-4,000 people in church.
That's great.
But he's amazing because he's very involved in his community. He's extraordinary. He's on boards everywhere, but he's very well respected and extraordinary and doing work for the people. So we have to make sure that if you're in a church, and if your church should be doing something for the community, look at what happened look at what COVID did for us. I didn't bring this up. All of a sudden, people who you walked by and didn't pay attention to, became essential workers. And people that you were clapping for them around the world. You were banging your pots around the world. And I remember when a guy, if he were a nurse, people would look askance at him. But no one gave a rat's ass now, because in this time, it changed the impression overnight. And as we go forward, that's indelibly etched in people's minds. So what does that mean? Let's look at this. Let's look at the way unarmed Black men are treated, and how do we change that too overnight?
So I guess we have to keep moving forward. We have to listen.
Yeah.
And we have to listen with an open heart. I think, when you listen and you're just thinking about how you're going to respond.
Yeah, you're not listening.
Like, people will actually wait until you formulated your thought for you to speak. And I think that we need to listen, digest, and I'm as guilty as anyone because Lord knows I can talk. But to listen and to hear with an open heart, with an innocent heart, with a non-judgmental heart, to understand that, those little silly expressions there, but for the grace of God go I. It's true. I mean, I don't know if it's the grace of God or Lucky Sperm Club, but whatever it is, we each have a path. And I do believe that there's tragedy and joy in everyone's journey.
Mm-hmm.
COVID has allowed me to connect with people that I don't often get to see.
Mm-hmm.
COVID has allowed me to connect with all of you. It's asked me to work harder than I've ever worked in my darn life. And I couldn't get through it without Bo and Jason and the teams that helped me do my work. But it has also given me reflection, and you were right. Every time I go to Fairway, I don't just look at the girl bagging my groceries.
Mm-hmm.
I thank her for being there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I thank the guy who, if I'm meeting a messenger, or it's like, thank you for your service.
Yes.
And we have to make this politesse. Mary Nelson just wrote, not just Black men, but Black women and LGBTQ people of color are victims of police brutality. here is what we do. And you're right, Ruth, guilt doesn't happen. It takes conviction, and we have to start where we are and do what we can do. These people through COVID who do what they do have changed it.
Yep.
COVID and this explosion of anger, I don't think are an accident, because when you look at the numbers and you see who's dying, if I were African American, oh God, I can imagine the mouth I'd have on me right now. All I can come up with is tears for how angry and sad I am. But this has got to stop, people. And I don't care what race, what religion, what sexuality. I don't care where you pray, who you sleep with. I truly don't. I'm grateful that you're in my world. But we have an opportunity to change. I have an opportunity to change. So I'm not losing track. It's not going to be, it's been a year since I've seen you or more. When did I do your show?
But don't worry, I still buy your clothes.
Oh, thank God. That's all I care about.
You're sending me to debtor's prison, but I still buy your clothes.
You'll have to stop by the studio when this is over and pick up. That was a funny story when we met, but anyway.
Well, but I tell people, and Wayne Dyer said this, and I was blessed to meet Wayne Dyer. I met him in '76 when I was in radio, when he was first driving around and selling his book. And then I met him again at PBS. And he said, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And it's true.
That.
And Harriet Tubman said, every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world. You can change the world.
Denise, I don't think we've ever had a TGIF and an hour go by so much. I want you to know there are 219 comments. I could sit here and talk to you till the wee hours of the morning. But those quotes are a beautiful place for us to kind of draw this to an end. If there's anybody out there with any last questions for Denise, let us know. I am so glad we reached out to you. I am so grateful for this time, for your honesty and your integrity and your spirit of generosity.
I just want to get one last thing. My show is Fuel for the Spirit. It airs Saturday night at 8:30 on AM 570 and 102.3 FM, The Mission, WMCA. Just go to WMCA online and you can go there, and then you can go to the program schedule and the day, and you'll find me. And these are where you'll hear the father and son talking about the to-do list when you're African American.
Denise, you do good.
Thank you. And you do too. And tell everyone, thank you for being online.
I want to thank you all. Have a safe weekend. Stay safe, stay sane. Listen, open hearts will lead us somewhere. Denise, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.